Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Educated Colonel Snap channel. How you doing? So today, I was initially going to just fully review Ghost Spider. It's the last day before the pass ends, so it's a good time. I've been waiting to make that video because I really felt it wouldn't be accurate and justice if I didn't have Spider-Man 2099 out, since it's a big part of the move archetype. Ghost Spider is a move deck archetype card, so I wanted to wait and have a good understanding of the synergies before I made that review. But as I was doing it, I really just got to thinking, why don't I just do all of the season pass cards? So that's currently the case we're on. We're going to be reviewing every single card in the June season. Usually, sometimes I make single videos about a particular card, but I think, oh, it's a good time and it's a new format to try. So here we have the June season, all cards reviewed. Now I do have a blueprint or a framework going in, so I'm trying something a little bit different this time. I'm going to be putting the untapped data that I'm using, so you can kind of see the ratios, right, in terms of games, in terms of win rates and stuff like that. And when I'm going to be talking about the card, and I'm going to be trying to put the most popular deck for that like season using the card, and then the most like the highest win rate deck, and see, that's going to give you more information. We're going to see how it feels. Usually I just make the deck um in Snap Fans deck builder, and then I post that. But I want to see how the reaction is to just having the full information there, and then making your own judgments from that. So that's the framework for the decks, and then I'm going to be having a core and not core for the cards. So core does it means like I think most players should like heavily consider getting the card. Essentially, that's what core means. I think it's going to be a card that can stand the test of time, used in a lot of decks, etc. And not core doesn't mean you shouldn't get it, but it means that you're going to have to be playing that particular archetype, and it's a archetype that you enjoy and will come back to. So in this like example, a lot of the non-core will be like, if you are a move deck player, then this is a something you could play. But it's kind of like Modork or anything like that. That card, right? If you're a discard deck player, then yeah. Nimrod, if you're a destroy deck player, then yeah. So even though those like might have the non-core tag, if you are a person that plays those particular archetypes, then you would still get it, even if it's not necessarily something that I recommend for everyone to get. So that's kind of the understanding, the framework about those particular cards. So let's first talk about Ghost Spider season pass card. You can see it on screen. I do have not core, just because it's not a card I think you're really going to need to be using. I do think it's a good card, so that's the issue here. I think it is a card that could see a lot of play, but based on like players' use cases and stuff like that, it really hasn't been a dominating factor. It has some fun interactions. There's some things a lot. There's a particularly interesting deck with that Paper is running that's using Doctor Octopus and Ghost Spider to move it to another lane after messing a single lane that you do have. So there's those kind of interactions that are pretty cool, but generally the card itself isn't necessarily being a game changer in whether you win or not. So I wouldn't necessarily say this is a core card that you need to grab. If you want to skip the season pass, you can, but it will have some uses, and I do expect there being some decks that run this card. So I definitely think there are going to be some decks eventually that are very strong that run this card, but right now it's not really a core card that you need to grab up. And with the new spotlight system, you might like randomly get this if it shows up next to something else. So that's my current thoughts on this particular card. But here we have some of the popular decks. So you can see at the top, this is a deck by Molt. I already know this deck, right? The Molt move, right? So that's like streamer influenced in the popularity section, but it is a deck that can work, that does do well. And then down here you do have like the more higher win rate deck here. This is more of a Dark Hawk deck with move pieces in. You get the Miles Morales and the Spider-Man 2099. This popular deck actually also hits Silk, I believe, and Spider-Man 2099. So this was like the best deck using all the new move cards. So that's something to keep in mind, that a lot of them really are focused in that one particular deck. Next up, we have Silk. So Silk is a pretty interesting card. It's kind of like a lizard that moves around. Doesn't have that drawback, but it does move around. The more, I guess, problematic issue I would say with Silk is that a lot of times you don't get to control where it ends up, and and the way the game works, a lot of times if you're losing a lane, you're losing it by more than 5, and if you're winning a lane, like sometimes you need that 5, and if this goes into a lane you're already losing, it becomes like a dead card because that 5 power isn't contributing to helping you win at all, and you don't really get to fully control where this ends up a lot of the time, since it moves everywhere, and if you're trying to like set up a lane, it just moves out of that lane, right? So if you're trying to win the left lane and Silk's in there, well then Silk's never going to stay in there. So it's always going to be in a different lane unless you're like manipulating, like you're spending 1 mana on the right lane just in case it jumps to that side, and then you go back as your final card. Like it's too much trickery and too much investment to make sure it ends up in a lane that you care about, and that's really been its like problem. It's not a bad card, but there's a lot of game states where the moving actually hurts you more than it helps you. It requires like a very specific deck where you can take advantage of the moving around archetype, and no one's really playing Craven or anything to really utilize it in like a meaningful I gain power way. So that's kind of been its issue. It's not a bad card, and I can definitely see some use cases for it. It's really good with Miles Morales is my current thought, but overall it hasn't been like crazy, and I wouldn't necessarily call it a core card. So here we have some popular deck archetypes. The most common deck archetype, even though it's not that popular, right, is the Stature deck still. So that deck is pretty good still. I think that deck is strong. It's just like no one's really playing it anymore. So, it's a little bit weird, but and maybe it struggles to like output the damage of or the stats of Kitty. It struggles to output the stats of sometimes Lockjaw if you don't have Shang-Chi. So maybe that's like the issue where it's not as clean into those like very common matchups. So that's why I know not that many people are playing it, but it's still an okay deck. You can see the win rate's still pretty high. And then the down list is the same list as before. There wasn't a lot of like Silk decks. Honestly, there wasn't too many. So you could kind of take a look at that and say, oh, it's not popular. People didn't buy it, etc., etc. It can do well, but it's not a card you have to get. So definitely would put it in the non-core section as well. Next up, we have Spider Ham. So this one has the ability to transform a random cost card in your opponent's hand into a pig, keeping its power and cost. Now this one I will say is core. This one I think it's a cheap ability that affects the game, that's very relevant and will get stronger as more cards are added. This can definitely neutralize some decks by itself. So really powerful card. Definitely think it's something you want to be looking into getting if you can. So this one I would definitely say is a core card. If you only have enough resources for one card this season, this is the card I would pick for sure. And definitely a card I don't think you're going to regret too much picking up. Now, when it comes to powerful and popular deck list, right, I would say Kitty is the most used deck for Spider Ham. It just fits in very easily. You can bounce it, play it again, blah, blah, blah. It's very useful in that retrospect, but you can also use it in Lockjaw. This one has a pretty high win rate as well, where you're just going lockjaw into with high evolution. But now instead of only having Wasp, you also have the Spider Ham as a flippable target. So definitely some powerful lists you can use, but it's just giving you a sense of like what people are playing, what seems to work and what seems to be popular. So definitely a strong card. Next up, and finally, we do have Spider-Man 2099. Now, this card is not horrible, but I think some would say that the cost is too high. Not because it's like badly statted or anything like that, but in the way move decks like to play, turn 4 is really important. That's when they like do their combos, right? That's when you go like Iron Fist into Vulture, or you go Spider into Cloak, or anything like that. That's really where a lot of their combo turns end up being on turn 4. And by playing Spider-Man 2099, you have to just play this 4/6 on turn 4 and then try to combo in other turns, or you need to like play Iron Fist on 3, but then it's not very clear what you're going to be destroying on the 4th turn, right? A lot of times the turn 4 destroy, especially if you have priority, is not very impressive, right? You're killing a 3 cost card at most, which a lot of times is like not that much power. So you usually want to be moving Spider-Man 2099 like turn 5, turn 6, which means that like your early combos are very lackluster, right? If you want to move Dagger, that you want to do that later. If you want to move Vulture's like flying, right? But it means you have to Iron Fist on 2, and then you Vulture on 3, and then like it's not clean. So that's kind of been its issue in move decks. There have been some other decks that have taken a use of it. I would say mostly destroyed decks as well have used Spider-Man 2099 in some capacity. It's been working out for them. But in terms of a core card that you're going to need, I'm not really seeing that coming from this card. It's been fun to play sometimes, but it's not a card that you would necessarily call you have to get a core or anything like that. So that's my thoughts on the card. And then here we have some powerful deck lists for that. So wow, I press one button and I go like 6 down. Okay. But here we have some deck lists here. We do have at the top a Thanos build. That one seems okay. I would say not. The win rate's actually lower than the generic list that we've had for like 3 of the cards, right? Where you're running the Darkhawk with Silk and Spider-Man 2099. But it is a pretty cool list, right? The Thanos list, where you are trying to use Spider-Man 2099 with the Space Stone to destroy things, and has a really, really cool outcome. So that's definitely something you can use. I think it's the list I like recommended before it came out. I guess some people tried it and didn't change anything. And honestly, the win rate's not that bad. Like, so I'm gonna take it. So that this might be my influence, Kekwe, but generally pretty cool. But overall, like the numbers aren't crazy, right? Like if you look at like Spider Ham's play rate, right, 11,000 games compared to, but I mean this card isn't super popular, right? So it's play rate or games played, right? It means people have to have bought the card, so. Whereas a lot of people were recommending Spider Ham, not a lot of people were recommending Silk or Spider-Man 2099, right? Like, so you can see like Ghost Spider, a lot of people buy the season pass, right? So Ghost Spider has a lot of play rates at the very top, and then Spider Ham was a card people were recommending, so it also has a lot of play rates at the very top. But when it comes to Silk and Spider-Man 2099, the amount of hype and people promoting the card wasn't as high, so you can see even at the highest play rates is just not that much, so you can just kind of see that. But we can kind of look at the recap. So this is kind of a recap. I would say the season pass is skippable, and the only card I would really recommend is Spider-Man or Spider Ham. just because the others aren't necessarily that crazy or core or something I think you're going to be really focused on unless you're a move deck player or in Spider-Man 2099 case of destroy deck players. I think the initial assessment for a lot of these cards was pretty accurate. I would say maybe the Ghost Spider hype was a bit too much, but the other cards I think were accurate in terms of how they ended up being in the meta. So this is a different format. I wanted to review all the cards and just talk about it instead of just doing Ghost Spider, which is what I normally do. Just like, hey, full review for the season pass card. What do you guys think of the new format? And you want, we should do more of these for the other cards. So take care of yourselves. Hope you guys enjoy this one. And hopefully next they'll be releasing like data for the new season. I really want to see if there's a drop down for the series drops because that's a big deal. And then just like some of the spotlight caches, I hope they let us know what's in those. So those are things definitely to talk about. But we'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves and have a wonderful rest of your day. That's the wrong button.
Once you watch him, you won't go back. He'll teach you to marvel snap. Your skills will be